Hey guys, it's Jaren with Patrick Adair Supplies. Today we are working on our August sub box ring, and this one is going to be our Boundless edition. So let's get into that video.
Every month, we dive into epic tutorials that break down everything you need to know to make awesome rings with your monthly sub box. We'll cover the tools, the materials, and techniques you need to turn your box into a one-of-a-kind masterpiece. Whether you're a first-timer or a pro, you're in the right place.
So in this month's box, we have some diamond cutting discs that I'll be showing you how to use later, some super thin adhesive, as well as for our materials, we have some aqua glow powder, a mixing vial, crushed turquoise, a white ceramic liner, some 24 karat gold leaf, and aquamarine color pigment. As usual, I like to prep my materials before I actually make the ring, and so I'm going to start out by crushing our turquoise here, just a bit finer and to give different variation in sizes, or you can just use the sizes that come sent to you. I also like to use mesh strainers to separate the different sizes. That way I have a bit more control while I'm inlaying on where things go and how the end result is going to look. Typically I use larger pieces first in inlaying, and then I use the smaller pieces to fill in any voids and gaps inside the inlay. Now I'm going to prep our base color. In this case, I'm using aquamarine color pigment as well as our aqua glow powder and mixing those together at a 3:1 ratio. This ring is a little bit different than ones that you may have seen. This is one of our Boundless Edition rings. This just means that we start out with a ring liner and then layer materials on top of each other to create the main mass of the ring, and then shape it to how we want. These are super unique and fun rings to make, and so I hope this serves as a good example as to what you guys will be able to do with different materials and different ring liners that we have available. What you want to start out with is a base of color, and in this case this is our aqua color that we just created, and then you're just going to do a couple different layers on top of each other. And keep in mind, you don't want this too thick or else the ring itself will be too thick in the end. You just want to make sure you're covering the entire base of the ring without any white showing through. A mistake I made here is I just used too much super thin on this step. That just caused the color pigment to clump up a little bit in some spots, and so that's just something to learn from. Not too big of a deal, but something to keep in mind. My next step is to pour on our crushed turquoise. I'm starting out with the larger pieces that I have and just pouring that on mostly on the sides because the middle is going to be removed way later anyways. And then I am going to pour on smaller pieces on top of that, filling any of the voids in between the larger pieces. And this way you're going to have a very full looking ring at the end. And you're just going to keep repeating that step, just layering on the turquoise as much as possible, using different sized pieces throughout as well, just to get variation in the look until it is all the way built up and maybe about 2 to 3 layers thick. Once you're happy with that, you can use a couple sprays of accelerator to harden everything. And then a really good tip here is to use the back of your tweezers to knock off any excess material on the sides of the ring. And this will just prevent a couple problems later. When you start building up layers of super thin, sometimes super thin can drip over the edges and glue the ring to the ring mandrel. And so that just helps prevent that. A couple other things to help prevent that is do a couple drops at a time while adding these clear coat layers and building that up slowly. As well, you can wrap the ring mandrel with electrical tape. If you do glue the ring to the ring mandrel, it's a lot easier to get the ring off with tape on it than it is gluing metal to metal. Once everything is built up and the ring begins to look a little bit like this, we're ready to begin doing the general shaping of the ring. I'm using an 80 grit Dremel drum here to slowly sand down everything and giving the general thickness and shape that I want. This doesn't have to be perfect, but this gives me the general shape that we're going for in the end. If you have a belt sander, you can also sand the edges off like this, or you can just use a piece of sandpaper and hand sand it just to get everything flush on the edges as well. Now that I have the bulk of the material removed, I'm going to bring it back to the lathe and use 220 grit sandpaper just to make sure that everything is nice and round and the shape that I want. Now that I'm liking the general shape of the ring, I'm going to stop there and completely dry this off. Now I'm going to add a layer or two of super thin just to fill in those voids. And this will prep us for our next step, which is creating the channel for our gold leaf later on. And so that's where our diamond cutting wheels come into play. For cutting the channels, I'm using 2 diamond cutting wheels and just gluing them together. That way the channel is thick enough to what I want for an 8mm band. However, if you're doing, say, a 6mm band, maybe just use 1 cutting wheel and just slowly widen the channel as you go. Now you're going to put that tool inside your Dremel jaws and you're ready to begin cutting the channel. I'm also using here a lathe Dremel tool holder, and that just helps me be a lot more precise when cutting, but you can do this by hand if you have a steady hand. But I would recommend getting a tool like this if you're able to find one for your corresponding lathe and Dremel tool that you have. With a tool like this, you're able to be so accurate down to fractions of a millimeter, and so I like to use a pair of calipers just to measure each side of the inlay channel and make sure it's even. In this case, it wasn't, and so I'm going back in and slightly widening the inlay channel just to make sure that it's centered and everything looks symmetrical. As you can see, we've created a beautiful channel for our gold leaf. The gold leaf that we're sending you guys is completely genuine 24 karat gold leaf, and it's a little bit different than any gold foils that you find online. Since this is completely genuine, it is extremely fragile and difficult to work with, and so just take your time on this step and slowly put in the gold leaf as you go. The technique I like to employ is taking about a quarter to half a sheet of gold leaf and laying it down the length of the inlay channel, and then using my fingers to kind of rock back and forth, compressing the gold leaf into the inlay channel. This is something that takes a little bit of time and experience to figure out, but I hope watching kind of gives you guys a general idea of what you're going for. It is a more difficult material to work with, but the results really do speak for themselves. Now that I'm happy with that and the inlay channel is completely filled with the gold leaf, I'm going to use a couple drops of CA adhesive just to lock everything in there and fill the rest of the voids. Since we have added a couple more layers of CA, the ring has gotten a little bit thicker, and so I'm going to use 220 grit sandpaper to sand it back down. This will get the ring to the thickness that we want so the ring is comfortable. As well, it will remove any excess gold leaf on top of the turquoise. And as well, it allows you to do any final shaping that you want to do before we do the final finish on the ring. Right here I'm taking the ring and flipping it over to the other side. It is a lot easier to shape the ring on the edges when the ring is sitting on the edge of a ring mandrel. Not super necessary, but something I like to do personally. For our final finish on the ring, I'm using 500, 1000, and 1200 grit sandpapers and doing a very thorough sand all the way around the ring. Since this ring is completely round and domed, you're able to see scratches from all different angles, and so you want to make sure you're very thorough when doing the final sand. For our polish, I'm using our Astrotech polishes that are available on our website, and I'm using 1, 2, and 3 here. That way we have a very nice mirror-like finish. This ring turned out beautifully. I hope you guys like this one. This is a great example of what can be done in boundless rings. If you guys do like this one, please let us know in the comments, and we can do more variations on this type of design in the future. I'll see you guys next time.